Welcome to the Misophonia podcast. This is season 5, episode 16. My name's Adil Ahmad, and I have Misophonia. This week, I'm excited to speak to two guests. Mary doesn't have misophonia herself, but she is the mother of someone with misophonia. She has become extremely passionate about the cause of misophonia awareness and understanding misophonia to the point where she's working on a book about it. And it's going to be incredible and extremely moving. For this conversation, she has also brought her mother-in-law, Sophie, who is 87 years old and also has misophonia. So we get her perspective on misophonia going back, obviously, many, many decades, right up to today, and her very robust dating life, believe it or not. Sophie also has a daughter who actually has misophonia too. So lots of complex perspectives here. And some things we've never discussed before, like what it's like to date a man in his 90s who eats with dentures. Please follow the show on Instagram at Misophonia Podcast, also on Facebook and Twitter. And if you like this episode or any episode, you can help a lot by leaving a quick rating or review wherever you listen to this podcast. All right, now here's my conversation with Mary and Sophie. Yes, it's a great honor. Mary and Sophie, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you both here.
Thank you.
We're very excited. Thanks, Adil.
Yeah, so we might as well talk about where we're located. You're actually very close to me here in St. Paul. That's correct?
Yes, I'm actually in the suburb of St. Paul, Arden Hills, at my mother-in-law's house, but we're definitely neighbors.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've had a few people, and it seems to be a bit of a small community here. Great. And do you want to maybe talk about your relationship with Sophie?
Oh gosh, that would alone.
Right. Well, maybe just briefly to see kind of the
yes.
Like how you.
We don't like each other.
Well, this will be a good show then.
Yeah, right. We'll argue the whole time. Actually, I feel so lucky that I married into this family. Although as far as misophonia goes, I didn't realize that Sophie had misophonia until 2019 when my son was diagnosed with misophonia. And I looking back, there's some things maybe we can talk about here today that I think, oh, misophonia explains X and Y, and maybe it does or doesn't. But I actually happened to tell Sophie's only daughter, Judy, is my husband's twin sister. So I'm here with my mother-in-law, and she has 4 children, and of those 4, there are twins, and I married John, one of the twins. The other twin is Judy, and I was telling her about Merritt's misophonia diagnosis, my son. And Judy, I told her, and Judy started to cry. Tears just started rolling down her cheeks, and she said, I have that too. And yes, and I was shocked. And then she told me the story of being awake in the middle of the night, very upset about things that had happened during that day related to her misophonia, and she was Googling, why am I so angry? And then she found there was a word, and it was probably early in the morning or late at night, like the wee hours, and she texted Sophie and said, am I telling this story right? There's a name, Mom, for this thing, because Sophie has it too. And do you remember that text?
Oh, yes.
Tell us about it.
I saw the word, and I right away went on my computer and looked it up and got the meaning or whatever of it. And yeah, it felt good to know what we had, misophonia.
Yeah, wow. And so, Sophie, do you want to maybe, I don't like to ask women their age, but do you want to tell roughly kind of how old you are? Just to give people a context, like how far back this goes.
It goes back quite a ways, because I was thinking last night, okay, when did I notice how weird I was? But it goes back, I think, in my 30s. So that would be 50 some years ago. I'm 87 and a half.
Wow. Yeah.
So it goes back quite a ways.
Do you remember anything as a child or teenager?
No, I think it was more so when I started having my kids.
Okay.
And these little things like the boys cracking their knuckles at the table would just drive me crazy. So I would go over and pull their hair until they stopped.
Oh no.
That's perfect.
And all my boys had crew cuts, so it was kind of hard to keep hold of their hair. But they would quit.
Sorry.
But it was very, very irritating.
Gotcha. Okay, so the kids actually. How old are your kids at that point?
I was just going to say, right now they are, I would say they were 10, 11, and 13.
Gotcha. And your daughter was probably not making noises, but she was probably watching.
Right. She never cracked her knuckles.
And I guess growing up when you were a child, I know you said you don't remember anything. I guess. Well, what was I gonna say? Well, I was gonna ask, was there like a day, like a moment when your sons were making those sounds that you remember, or did it just kind of evolve?
Yeah, like a first moment.
Not really, because people who crack their gum, or you go into a store and you see a salesperson behind the counter chewing like a cow. That stuff goes way back, because it just did. It was just irritating to be around that.
And that went back even further than the boys? Or did that start to annoy you after your boys started to, making those sounds?
Anybody snapping their gum, I can remember way back. I mean, we probably never chewed gum until I was a teenager, because we were poor. But yeah, I'm sure that goes back to before childbirth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And what did your family say as you were, pulling hair and stuff? Like, did you say, like, be quiet, these sounds are bothering me?
No, I think actions spoke louder than words at the time.
When did your daughter started to show symptoms? I'm wondering if it was like soon after this.
Oh boy, pretty young, because if she saw, if we were sitting at the table and happened to have raw carrots and we started eating, taking bites, oh my goodness, her head would shake and she would look at each one of them and say, stop it. Stop it. It really bothered her.
And this was before the knuckle cracking phase.
I would say probably around the same time.
Gotcha.
This is interesting. When I met my husband, he was telling me stories about his childhood, and one of the very first stories he told me, I mean, the very first thing you tell someone you start dating, those are important. Those are formative and they stand out. And he told me that he and his two brothers used to torture, that's his word, his twin sister by chewing. And and I don't want to say what they chewed to trigger people, but they would take food that they knew would bother her, until she went in her room and started screaming and crying. And my husband felt kind of bad about this. But I think from his stories that misophonia was kind of a big part of their family life, even though there wasn't a word for it. Sophie laughed when I said that.
Yeah.
I think that's true.
Yeah. especially
Yeah.
especially Judy and myself. Yeah, we were triggered a lot.
Did you two maybe bond a bit more over this, even though you didn't know what it was the name? But I'm wondering if that brought you two even closer.
Well, it brought us closer because if we were in the same room, I'll give you an example. When I was married to Donald, we were all eating an ice cream cone, and he got down to the cone part, which is crispy and when you take a bite. Well, he got down to that part. We're all in the same room. And as soon as he did, both Judy's head and mine moved towards each other. And because we heard the bite. So I said something to him. I said, "Oh, you have to chew that loud," or whatever I said. He took the rest of the cone and just threw it against the wall.
He
In
hurls
anger.
the ice cream cone across the room.
And he kind of swore at us and said, "Can't even eat an ice cream cone in this house." Well, by that time, Judy and I are laughing. And, what can you say? I went and cleaned up the mess. So that was one big example.
Yeah, interesting. And there must have been more. I'm sure your Donald's probably pretty frustrated, as most of our partners and family members are.
One thing I noticed, Sophie, and this is one of those things that I wonder about, and I've never asked you, is so Judy, who has misophonia, has always hosted the family events. We would always go for many things, celebrations, etc. And she always serves lasagna or sloppy joes. I never can remember a crisp, crunchy food at these family events except potato chips because of the chip dip. That's a family legend. But if you think about all the annoying things that might arise with misophonia and crunch, I think Judy just omitted 95% of those things. And I'm talking, I've been with this family 30 years. That's 30 years of soft meals. Sophie, what do you think? Am I wrong about that? I could be wrong.
Yeah, I don't know.
Do you know what I mean, though?
Yep, I know what you mean by her forgetting to put those out or whatever. I
Forgetting,
don't
quote
know.
unquote.
We'll have to ask
Forgetting,
Judy.
quote unquote.
Yeah. So I really don't know.
Yeah, and what about around? So this was like the 60s or 70s, I guess, 50 years ago.
Probably well, my kids were all born late 50s and 61 and 62.
And so you guys, you two had each other, you and Judy. Did you ever meet maybe anybody else that you remember thinking back, like, oh, they probably have the same sensitivities and they're just going around like us without any idea?
You know what? I have never run across anybody who ever complained about that. Like I have. I'll give you another example. I play bridge, and one time there were 8 of us here, and several of the gals, when they would deal out their cards, they would snap them as they put them down. I finally just took my hand and put my hand over whoever was doing it. And I said, "You're snapping the cards." Well, it got to be funny because ever since then and to this day, they do not snap their cards.
See, it could be that easy. You can just say something and
Yes.
other people will
Yes.
accommodate. It's usually not a big deal.
Right. And one more, and this one is I was really brave.
As many as you want, please.
When I did this one, I was at a theater with my husband, and he was kind of deaf. So he could not hear this, but I could hear this gal cracking her gum in the next aisle down a few aisles. I mean, it was loud. And I looked at my husband. I thought, oh, he doesn't hear it. So I finally said, I got to go for a minute. And I got up and I went over and I found her because she was still cracking it. I just came up behind her, poked her a little on the shoulder. She turned around, and all I said was, when you crack your gum, it's very annoying. She just looked at me and said, okay. She never cracked it again.
Again, wow, you are a hero. Everyone in the
I
should have
was
gotten
a
up and
hero.
applaud.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. And this was since you found out how to name, or this was like back in the in the Wild West.
I didn't quite understand what you said.
Oh, was this just since you knew it had a name? Like or was this back before you knew this had a name, and it was just kind of annoying you?
Oh, it was before.
Okay, yeah, I was
It
just
was
wondering if
I
having the
just heard it.
name. Yeah. Oh, just yeah. The reason why I asked was just wondering if like knowing that it had a name maybe has made you kind of feel more confident to kind of. Sometimes it makes people feel more confident to kind of be able to advocate for themselves. But it sounds like you've been doing it for decades.
Yeah. No, it did not give me any more confidence. I just did it because it was so annoying.
Yeah.
And I couldn't watch the movie because I
Right.
could hear it.
So I'm assuming then, back in the 60s, 70s, when you have something like this, you're not, well, I don't know, like therapists were not, or psychiatrists were not as big of a deal back then. Did that ever kind of occur to you to maybe seek out some help, or maybe for yourself or your daughter, or was it really like, it's my problem, it's just my quirk?
Yeah, absolutely not. Did I try to find out what it was?
Did you feel like it was different than other people?
Well, yes, only because if my kids were around and, triggered something, and I would say something or do something, and they'd say, Mom, you're weird. That's about it.
Yeah, that's the classic label. pre 2000s, even now. Did it between your maybe between yourselves and the rest of your family, you and Judy and the rest of your family? I know you two seem to kind of, well, at least move your heads together when you were being triggered. Maybe be a bit closer. Did you find that it caused any kind of distances or rifts between the misophonia side of the family and the rest of the family?
Not at all. No.
It was just kind of classic sibling kind of stuff, and
right, and everybody has a sense of humor.
That's important. Yeah.
Yes. So I think that's how we got by. Just laughed about it.
Well, I have to say one thing that struck me, which is about misophonia. I want to say maybe 2 or 3 months ago, I'm writing a book about misophonia, so I wanted to quote interview my sister-in-law and mother-in-law about their experiences. And that quote interview, I haven't told you this, Sophie, quickly deteriorated into Sophie, in a good way, into Sophie and Judy laughing about all their triggers and making fun of people. Like it kind of going from person to person and situation to situation, bringing out the trigger and just chortling over it. Like, can you believe how awful X is? And they're just a slob. And they are laughing. This went on for an hour. And it was it was so funny. And I thought, and so for me, as someone who I don't have misophonia, I was just so struck by how alive and present misophonia still is in their lives at 87 and 58. I mean, do you remember the conversation and like laughing about things that triggered you? I was struck. I couldn't get a word in. I couldn't talk. They were having such a gleeful raking other people and sounds over. It was great though. I mean, I'm not saying that in a bad way. Do you remember some of those things, Sophie, that you guys bonded over or talked about? John's boots, Judy's partner, his footsteps were one.
Oh, that didn't bother me. Bothered her.
Right.
Oh dear. No, there were so many triggers. Really, there were,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't think anything of it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I try to stay away from, like, if I'm in a department store or something and I hear something or see something, I just move on.
Yeah, that's the thing. Back then, you couldn't just pop in some noise canceling earbuds in your iPhone in the '60s and '70s. So I
Well,
guess you're
excuse me, it bothers me to no end if I'm in a store and somebody is on their cell phone and I can hear them talking.
Mm.
oh, absolutely, absolutely,
That
yeah,
that's got to drive everybody nuts.
Is
oh,
it?
absolutely.
Are you triggered by the sound, by the talking?
I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Doesn't that
Well,
bother you? If somebody's talking on the phone and you're
It
there?
annoys me, but I don't get angry. I don't feel like I have. It doesn't do anything physiological to
Oh,
me. I might think disdainful thoughts about that, but I don't have.
so Sophie, back in you said in department stores back in the day, like your only coping mechanism at that point was probably either to say something or to leave.
right,
You couldn't put headphones on yourself or anything and try to block it out.
right. I think I walk away a lot.
Yeah, and it's good exercise, so that's not a bad
Yeah.
thing. What were some other? Did you ever? I know you were not. Nobody was aware of it, but were you trying maybe any kind of relaxation or just trying to like close your eyes and breathe or something? These are kind of fairly recent methods, but I'm wondering if you had tried other things as well.
No.
Just kind of just say something or leave. Yeah, that's kind of all the tools that were probably around back then. And you said so Judy, well actually let's talk about maybe your husband. Did your husband um would just throw ice cream against the wall, and did he ever kind of like um take start to sympathize a little bit or try to take it more seriously after after the second or third decade of
No.
seeing it? Yeah.
Never. Nobody did.
Oh no, really?
No.
Did you bring it up to Donald and say?
No. Who knows if he even noticed
Mm-hmm,
that it
Mm,
bothered me?
mm-hmm.
Because I would never tell him to. Could you please chew a little quieter?
right.
That
Did you
would be.
hold any? I mean, yeah, we know obviously, yeah, I know how we bottle things up and then we laugh about it. But did you ever feel like it kind of you were holding kind of resentment or anything about it, lingering resentment?
No, not really.
Yeah, I mean that's actually not a bad thing to kind of like be able to realize that it's not the other person's problem. It is kind of our
Right.
inability to kind of be able to deal with it. What about Judy? Judy's partner. How did he kind of react
Oh,
to it?
he thinks she is really weird. Yeah, for lack of any other words.
Right, right.
He does not get it at all.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I do hear stories about that. It's interesting. So I know that Sophie is very much of a generation and a person constitutionally who isn't going to say anything about anything that's making her uncomfortable, and so I can see how and why she might never have mentioned her misophonia and the triggers all these years.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that generationally things have changed, and her daughter Judy is more able to assert her needs and say things to her husband, etc.
Oh yeah.
And then you go down one more generation, and your grandson Merrick, my son, we organize our family life around his misophonia so that he's comfortable. So I just see this interesting
Yeah.
generational change, you know.
Right.
And Sophie, I will say too that you and Judy have been the most supportive people for our family, talking to me about Americans misophonia, where I don't often get support, and it's meant a lot to me.
Okay. That's sad.
Yes.
Well, I don't know, they just don't, either they don't dwell on it or they just don't understand what's going on with us when we have a trigger,
Mhm.
when we get trigged.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So,
trigged. Yeah, that's how the young people say it. Way to go, Sophie.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, so that's interesting. Let's talk a bit about Merrick. I'm curious about the timeline here. So, when did was Sophie and Judy? Did you remember? Was it when did you guys realize that it had a name? Was it like 5 years ago or a couple years ago, kind of thing, or was it after Merrick started to show signs?
Well, I know that it was before because I told
Okay.
Judy in 2019, 2 years ago, that we had just discovered this.
okay.
Or maybe it was, yeah, or maybe it was, yes, or maybe it was later, a little bit later, but she had known for a year or several months. So it was
Hmm.
either 2018 or 2019 that you guys found out. Does that sound about right?
Well,
3 or 4 years ago?
it was when you found out about Merrick and
It
you
was right.
told Judy, and she said, "Hey, I got a name for our problem."
Mm,
Oh, so it wasn't, that's
No.
how you found out.
It's like yesterday that I found the name or heard the name.
Oh.
Yeah,
Okay.
it hasn't been 3 years.
Oh, okay.
No.
So I had a different story. So you found out through me, through Merrick getting a diagnosis.
Yeah.
mm.
Wow.
And how does that make you feel, Sophie? Like, you had this daughter's got it now. Your grandson is kind of plagued with it. Um, I guess it kind of helped you sympathize um, with it. Did you? It sounds like Mary's saying like you guys have been very supportive. That's probably means a lot to him and Mary.
I guess. I mean, I feel really bad about what has happened or what they're going through. I have never heard of anybody going through what they're going through.
Right. Yeah. Especially at this age, because well, actually, I mean, Judy was going through it at a young age as well. But at least now that people have more awareness, and there's like weirdos like me doing podcasts about about it. So hopefully word is getting out more. And Mary, do you want to talk a little bit about Merrick's history with it? Like, how long has he shown symptoms? And I know we've talked in the past how it's really been and you just said you've been kind of revolving family plans around it. You want to talk a little bit about Merrick's experience?
Sure. And I think it's interesting it's very interesting to me how I had a different story about how you found out about misophonia, Sophie. So I'm glad that we are doing this so that we, maybe can learn more. But I think the thing when Sophie says that she's never heard anything like this is that Merrick is triggered deeply um, by his parents, and he has visual and audio triggers. So he's got pretty severe misophonia, I would say, and I think he would say that too. And so it's really, really, really horrible for him to see or hear his parents. And we respect that and accommodate that. And we text and we email. We organize our home life so that he doesn't have to see us. I feel like we're pretty close, despite or maybe even because of this, via text and email, sadly. But I can't even tell people that this is our family life because I feel the judgment that I get as a parent, a lot of judgment. A, for the misophonia, its existence at all, you're judged. And B, for the choices that we're making as a family to fully accommodate our son. And I think that Sophie might not agree with the choices of accommodation. I don't know. We've never talked about that. But she's never, ever questioned what we're doing and how awful it is for Merrick. Not once. And that alone is huge for me as a parent. And Merrick, I haven't really had a quote normal conversation with him in 2.5 years. Sophie, I don't know. What do you think about our situation and Merrick when you learned about it?
I was shocked that you are going through this.
Mhm.
I have just never heard of that. I mean, and what else can you do though?
Right.
You don't have too many choices.
And I see that's where you differ when you say, what else can you do? Because you are thinking like you understand what Merrick is going through.
Yeah,
Yeah. And you can't put a kid through that.
it's a sad, sad situation. I
Yeah.
just I've never heard of parents being the trigger. Have you? The deal?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. In fact, yeah, that's what's so fascinating is that I mean, and honestly, the most common initial triggers are parents like eating around the table, from what I've heard, in like about 100 episodes, um, and so yeah, that's why it's interesting that I mean, you haven't like your generation hadn't heard about it. Obviously, you're exposed to it because you developed triggers and you saw Judy had triggers, but I'm sure that a lot of people that you knew that you were friends with growing up, and later on as a parent probably had it and were just kind of like in denial or kind of suffering in silence.
Are you with
Um,
us?
yeah, can you not hear me?
Just a second of a dropped connection.
Oh,
Now, fine.
oh, gotcha. Yeah, it said my interconnect connection is unstable. Weird. Okay. Sorry. Let me repeat that. Yeah, you were asking if I've heard of parents being the triggers,
Right.
and I was saying, yeah. I mean, the most common initial trigger actually is parents around the dinner table or their basically their eating sounds, and so that's interesting that you Sophie had never heard of this because I'm sure a lot of people that you grew up with and you were friends with as a parent were probably dealing with this but in a different way in without actually realizing what that they were dealing with it, probably suffering in silence.
And do you,
So
you know, Jennifer Brout, who is heads up Misophonia International and, you know, an activist and someone who also has misophonia, made the observation that, and she's probably my age, you know, 60-ish, that in her generation, kind of a reflective selfhood wasn't a component of childhood, adolescence, or early adulthood. That like that reflective selfhood that I think is pretty common for everyone nowadays to think about how you feel, are you safe,
right.
what are your emotions, etc. I never had those thoughts at all when I was growing up. I mean, I cannot even tell you. I never in a million years thought about my own safety, agency, my own needs. Didn't occur to me until I was into my 20s. And I think that this reflective self that we have, I don't know. I don't think it really existed. I think Jennifer Jo Brown is onto something in how misophonia has been recognized by older people. And I'm going to say, Sophie, that I think that's true for you. I don't know. Maybe you can correct me or admonish me.
I have talked to a lot of people about this, not one and all ages. These women I play bridge with, three of them are in their 90s. They have never heard of misophonia.
Mm.
And I'm not sure they even, I don't know. They've just never heard about it. So,
Do you think they believe you?
oh yes,
Okay.
because they see me
Mm-hmm.
in action. That this one gal will, before she bids or something,
Yeah.
she's doing this,
Yes. Yes.
and I just go like that.
Right.
I just
Right.
put my hand on hers again. She's, oh yeah, you and your,
Your thing.
but they don't get mad or anything. But they probably have never been around anybody who has all these little
Mm-hmm.
problems.
Do you listen? I know you don't listen to the radio and like have background noise. Is that because of misophonia?
I have no idea. I can stand the radio on for just so long,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's noise to me.
Mm-hmm.
Then I turn it off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
I think because I know that I that kind of tinny quality sound sometimes can trigger a Merrick, background
Okay.
music thing. So just wondered if that was.
no, it's not like chewing gum or
Mm-hmm.
chewing carrots or eating corn on the cob or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, right.
half of our
You-
food.
yeah. The women you play bridge with, I mean, I'm sure they haven't heard of misophonia, but I'm assuming that they have never kind of observed these conditions in other people, to their knowledge.
But so they have your friends that you play bridge with haven't really dealt with other people who have the same problem.
Evidently not.
What about other people you've talked to? You
Yeah,
said
and
you've talked to people of all ages.
Nobody. They don't even if they have triggers or if they go through they never say.
Right.
Oh, that's what happens to me too. Oh yeah, I can't. No, I never get a. Therefore, I feel like Judy and I are the only ones in marriage.
Right.
Misophonia.
So
Yeah.
tell people about. I was also struck. You recently started seeing someone new, Ralph.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, when we were talking before, he had talked about coming over to your house for lunch, but you thought maybe that wasn't going to work. So why don't you tell us, how did misophonia play into getting to know Ralph and starting to have lunch with him? She's making a face like you're eating bad medicine. So
I've told him about it.
Oh, so is this the first person that you've told about like this?
No.
Okay.
No, but he's older than I am, so he forgets it quicker. So I will probably tell him 85 times.
Well, that's funny.
Yeah, he did, because he said, "Now, what are you doing today?" And I told him I was on this podcast, and he's, "Oh, that's right. Oh, that's right." But then I'm kind of I'm right behind him,
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember everything either.
But did you wonder? I know that you had some hesitation about eating with him. How did that go? Did you go to a restaurant at first?
Judy brought that to my attention. She says, "How does he eat?"
Mm.
I said, "Well, I try not to watch because I don't want it to bother me."
Right. Right. And can you keep it from bothering you if you don't watch?
Right.
You can't.
Well, he's not bad.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say I've been with some that are much, much worse.
Mm-hmm.
So he's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I can handle it.
Well, okay, so that's just fascinating. So you've dated some other men in the not too distant past, and it's been an issue.
We are both laughing. So Sophie's 87.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna you can say whatever you want. She's a beautiful woman. She was a beautiful young woman.
Absolutely.
Beautiful woman throughout her life, and men follow her and fall at her feet her whole and it continues. She has buried two husbands and still has a bevy of boyfriends from which to choose. And I'm not kidding. And so Ralph is the most recent. And
lucky guy.
Akil, I've known Ralph. He is godfather to my twins, who are now 59. And I went to school with Ralph. So he's only he's 17 months older than I am. So we know all the same people and blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he was, when you told him about the misophonia though, so you didn't, when was the first time you ate with him? Was it in a restaurant?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, nothing.
And
Nothing.
No triggers, nothing.
No.
Okay.
No.
And did
God.
he start triggering you later? Or
No, he really doesn't trigger me.
okay, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Because I mean, not to make any stereotypes.
Wait,
but,
he does. He could trigger me because he's into repeating himself.
Okay, say more about that.
What can you say? Except that I hear the same story, and he doesn't have dementia or anything. Maybe he doesn't remember that he told me, but it's the
Same story.
same thing all every, and I don't have guts enough to say, well, I take that back. Yesterday I was with him and I did catch myself saying, yeah, you told me. Yeah, you told me. But I don't think he gets that.
That's
Yeah,
funny.
definitely repetition has come up as as an issue. It's usually short-term sounds, but I can see how it could kind of expand to an entire story, an anecdote that you hear over and over again.
Yeah, and I even hate to tell Judy that, yeah, but he repeats himself. So I just can't do that. Because it's kind of a mark against him,
Right.
And I don't want that.
So, do you have a visual trigger, Sophie? Like when you see somebody eating, is it give you at this point like almost the same kind of as hearing it?
When I see mostly women, because a lot of men don't even chew gum, when I see a woman chewing and her mouth is going lickety split, yeah, it can trigger me.
Yeah, very common. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. And what about not as I was going to say earlier, not to put stereotypes, but older people sometimes have more like eating sounds. They might have like stuff in like dentures or something. I'm wondering if like you've noticed that more the eating sounds are maybe you're more sensitive maybe to folks who are a little bit older because of maybe they eat a little bit differently sometimes.
Funny you should mention that because Ralph does have dentures, and he does chew differently. But I'm really trying not to let that bother me.
Gotcha. Okay.
And you're looking away. You're concentrating on something else.
I'm eating.
You're eating. Okay.
I'm looking at my food or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that's not atypical. People might focus on eating and not look.
Yeah. I feel like I have a tendency to if I'm not looking right at him, I'm looking, beyond him, which I don't like doing that either. I like eye contact.
But you do that so you're not triggered.
Maybe. Maybe.
And then some of your other past suitors and boyfriends, any kind of interesting react. Like, have you ever broken off a relationship because they just chewed gum like a cow, for example?
I'm sure she would.
I did dump 2 of them a couple of years ago
because of that.
Wait, I'm gonna
at the same time.
Why I did. No, there were no triggers.
Okay.
There just wasn't anything there.
Well, that's good. That's good. But truly, so you can see there is a long list of boyfriends, which
I'm sure.
I think is awesome. So Sophie, I wonder. I'm just going to ask you: have I triggered you? Like when we're eating and
you never eat. How did that happen? No,
but no, so I haven't.
No.
Okay. So and I thought about that. Like, what if I'm triggering you now, but nothing like that?
I don't see you that often. And
when we have family things here,
no.
Do you ever? No.
No.
That's good.
And what about, do we talk about Judy's husband? So I know it sounds like she does a lot of events. So you probably see them together in family events and whatnot, at least. Like, how does how do you know the story of how he's kind of like dealt with this over time?
He doesn't.
Okay.
He just says, God, you're so weird. He just doesn't understand it.
Does anyone talk to him about it, like the the misophonia side, to try to kind of like get him to understand, or is
I
it
have
just
tried.
yeah?
I've tried, but he doesn't get it.
Have you talked to John directly?
Oh, yeah.
And what do you say to
Oh,
him?
yeah. I say, John,
You
Judy
better
has
leave my daughter alone.
I said, things bug us and we can't help it. Yeah, I have told him that several times, but she'll come along and tell him to chew with his mouth shut or something, you know, and it just goes on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Judy told me that that she feels the tension with John
Yeah.
comes because he's not upset about misophonia. He kind of has an understanding, but he feels, this is what Judy told me, that Judy's handling it wrong. That her reactions are the reactions are the problem, not misophonia. But her response makes him angry.
Well, because it's him doing something that irritates her.
Mm-hmm.
And he is so laid back as far as other people doing that,
Mm-hmm.
that yeah, it causes friction between them. I mean, just at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And of course he'll say she is so weird, you know,
Mhm.
blah blah blah. So
Mm-hmm.
you can only try so long.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other instances of like other kinds of mental health matters in the family? I'm just curious if there's any other kind of reference points that people are able to kind of like compare misophonia to. No, it doesn't sound like it.
No, actually, for our huge family that we are very fortunate. There isn't.
I agree. There's not, I mean, there aren't, you think about the things that sometimes accompany misophonia, and I wouldn't
OCD and
say,
anxiety. Yeah.
mm-hmm, yeah, that, now, my son has OCD, so we do have that, but in the larger extended family, nothing.
No.
So
And
even
nothing.
his cousins, like even the younger generation, because a lot of things
Mhm.
tend to get identified in the younger generation, maybe more often.
We should say that we know of.
Right.
Right. That's
And
applied, of course. Yeah.
and I'm going to say that your family, the Thompson Sorensen family that I married into, open communication about one's interior life is not a family hallmark. So your family's not known for like saying what's inside and sharing deepest feelings. It seems like there's a very much ethics of pull yourself up by your boots and carry on.
Right.
Yeah.
Except like Judy, she will tell you how she's feeling and how she didn't sleep and where she's hurting. Judy has a few other issues. Let's just say that health issues, and she's sick of going to doctors, and I feel very bad about all that.
And these are like joint pain kind of things, unrelated.
Physical ones. Yeah.
Yes, very definitely.
But one of my profound misophonia moments as a person outside kind of looking in but living with it was when I talked to Judy and told her about Merrick. And she started crying, and I asked her what her first reaction to learning there was a name for this thing. What did that feel like? And she said that she was relieved to know that she wasn't a bitch, that that's how she saw herself her whole life, as an irritable, crabby, mean person, the B word. And when she heard there was a word and a reason why, she feels like she's always angry. That changed how she saw herself. And that was very powerful for her. And that was powerful for me and sad for me to think that someone I cared about had been thinking of themselves in these really kind of problematic terms her whole life. You know, I don't know if you felt a sense of relief or something. When you heard the word, you said it didn't matter that much, but I don't know if Judy's talked to you about that, but I think it mattered to her.
I don't know. No, it didn't. I was glad there was a name.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it didn't make me feel one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, well, the fact that it has a name is it's not going to automatically lead to a cure or anything. But yeah, it's
No.
interesting. Yeah, some people it's just a name. Others maybe it kind of puts a label on a big part of their identity, which is probably what happened with Julie. Yeah, because a lot of people, not just Judy, like walk around with a lot of guilt and shame because when they think of themselves as a bitch, whether it's a male or female, and they see what distance it causes between them and others. And I can see how she could get very
And
emotional when she.
I don't know what I would have done without a name. Again, from a different perspective, loving someone with misophonia, having a name and understanding why my child was avoiding me, standing around the corner and not looking at me, walking away. I mean, I knew he was running away from me and avoiding me, and and it was so terribly painful and confusing. So and for the mom as an outsider finding out why and that there was a name and there was no pathology between us, that was everything. That was everything for me.
Well, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And so, I guess how long did it take for you guys to realize that it was a real thing with Merrick and not just him,
Mm-hmm.
having a problem with you?
I think it probably from the time I really started noting that he was avoiding me and it was a distinctive thing that was just me because I was initially the only person triggering him in the house. Probably just 6 months,
Okay.
which isn't a huge, long amount of time, but it was so pronounced and dramatic
So sudden,
that,
right? So it was like almost
yeah,
like
yes,
1 month. 1 month he
yes,
was always in your arms, and then he's doesn't want to be anywhere near you.
yes,
Does he
absolutely.
remember what started to cause it? Was there a day? Was there some sound?
He has told me two different things about his first memories. So then he concluded he doesn't remember exactly. One of the possible first things would be middle school orientation. He remembers my foot jiggling, and and it was a visual thing, and that was a very early trigger. And that was 3 years before I noticed anything. So he reports that as a very early trigger. And around that same time period, he would hear me, mostly me, at night going to near his bedroom to use the bathroom or get a towel or something. So he would hear footsteps and noises that he was triggered by and associated with his mother. And then I would say he just kind of dealt with, I noticed it in retrospect because we slowly became less close. We didn't quite do the things together that we used to do. I remember once, about 2 years into his misophonia, again, I don't know, he doesn't know it has a name. And I was asking him about a video that he made with his friends, and he just literally turned around and walked away. And I said, "What's wrong with you?" And he said, "I don't know why, but I have to leave. I can't talk to you. I can't explain it. Don't make me explain it." And I didn't. And he left. And then it was a couple more years, slow estrangement. I knew something was wrong. I couldn't pinpoint it. But then when he started really avoiding me, and it was clear he was not going to be in my physical presence no matter what, that we sought out help and found a psychologist who thankfully pretty quickly recognized misophonia.
Huh.
That's lucky that because a lot of people, it's kind of a crapshoot if you go to a psychologist, even now, to if they've even heard of it. So that's great that you found. Did you seek
Totally
out somebody
lucky.
who was it by chance, or did you uh, call around and ask if people knew about it?
Well, here's the lucky part. So, Merrick had OCD, and the same psychologist who was treating him for that, quickly diagnosed the misophonia. However, with this OCD person, I kind of went to the internet and pick somebody close by. But I talked to a friend who was a professor in psychology, and she said, no. You need to do your research and find like a specialist, someone specially trained in pediatric OCD. Spend time, find the top 3 people within 90 minutes of your house and start from there. And that's what I did. And this particular clinician that we found was amazing. And not only did he quickly diagnose misophonia, but Merrick has been symptom-free from OCD for 2 years. So
that's great.
I think, yeah. I mean, of course that could change, and but the quality of the professional in our case made all the difference. And
So symptoms from OCD, was that through like talk therapy or medication?
he went initially talk therapy, and then he went to Rogers Behavioral Health, all ERP exposure therapy.
Ah, interesting. Okay, gotcha. And then his misophonia though is unchanged.
His misophonia is unchanged, and when he was being treated for OCD with exposure therapy successfully, even though his parents didn't want him to use exposure therapy for OCD, he wanted to try it, or for misophonia. And he was 16, so he tried using exposure therapy for his misophonia. And unfortunately, in our situation, that escalated his misophonia. It got dramatically worse after.
Oh,
so
okay.
That was our experience with that. You're giving me a look, Sophie. What do you think about exposing someone to the trigger sounds to have them get used to it? Did you know that?
I always that entered my mind. How come why can't we do that?
Mm-hmm.
But
do you think you could? You mean it entered your mind? Why couldn't you do exposure therapy and get used to it?
I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Would it be too hard, do you think, to sit and hear the?
I have to think about that. I really have to think about that.
Yeah, it's been tried. It's definitely, it's not I wouldn't say it's the most popular option. Just basically from the sound, if people have severe misophonia, their instant reaction hearing about exposure therapy is like, oh my God, that sounds like hell. If it were to help, that would be great.
Mm-hmm.
But there doesn't seem to be, there doesn't seem to be anything conclusive about anything related to misophonia yet. But that seems like at this point, a kind of a tough kind of therapy to try to do. And in your case, Mary, it seems like, it had the opposite effect. So it's another knock against it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, this is that even, I think the key point, my takeaway is that I'm very enmeshed in misophonia. My son has it, my sister-in-law, my mother-in-law, is that we don't know. Will there be a form of exposure therapy that's more nuanced that can help? Will there be medication? I don't know. And I that helps me understanding that we don't know anything yet, that we're still very early. And that takes some of the pressure off finding exact solutions and allows me to live in ambiguity a little more.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of where we're all living right now, in a little bit of ambiguity. I guess, thanks to both of you, Mary and Sophie, for coming on. Thanks, Mary, for thinking of Sophie, and Sophie accepting the invitation. It's super insightful to kind of hear how misophonia, how far it goes back, and how things have evolved.
Thank you. We'll be excited to hear it. Thanks for doing this, Adil. We really appreciate it.
Hey.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Mary and Sophie. Fascinating conversation. I can't wait for Mary's book to come out, and I'll have to have her back on. If you like this episode, don't forget to leave a quick rating or review. Wherever you listen to this podcast, you can hit me up by email at hello@misophoniapodcast.com or go to the website misophoniapodcast.com. Remember to support the show. You can also, if you can, monetarily leave, you can find our Patreon page at patreon.com/Misophonia podcast. Music, as always, is by Moby. And until next week, wishing you peace and quiet.